on the playoff doorstep. Josh Allen may be looking at a league MVP for sure. Decisions need to be made with the roster as the Bills inch closer to the postseason. I'm Kevin Carroll. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone podcast with just 2 games remaining.
And I'm Jon Scott. Crazy to think of the fluctuation of possibilities for this team, especially considering the conversations we had on this show merely a month ago, talking about the season's going to be over. They're not going to make the playoffs. People wanted Sean McDermott fired.
We were there.
It was all over the place. We were halfway off the rails, halfway off the cliff. And just when they thought they would lose it all, they reel everyone back in. And here, we're going to get into it. They could ultimately be the 2 seed as a division winner. They still could potentially not even make the postseason.
It's pretty crazy.
And there's still things in between. It's an amazing time with just 2 weeks to go.
And you think back, John, and I think about when that piece came out about Sean McDermott and the whole 9/11 thing, and how would the team react? Would they rally around their head coach? Would this be Bills getting kicked when they're down and this is going to derail it? It's the first, John. It's the team really rallied around him, and they've looked really good, John, since then, and that includes Bills quarterback Josh Allen, and this is a week-to-week thing. You know, if you go back a few weeks before the Bills beat the Cowboys, Dak Prescott talked about NFL MVP, Lamar Jackson in the mix the entire season. But now as this week rolled around, John, and now you're seeing more and more of the national guys start getting into the conversation with, the first time I heard about it was that, well, Aaron Rodgers maybe is backing Josh Allen for MVP. I looked at the clip. Maybe it wasn't that much. He was just rolling out a scenario. But sure enough, if you look at it, if what the Bills are able to do, they end up doing, and Josh Allen continues on a decent pace, very much up there for league MVP this year, if you look at the criteria on what league MVP is supposed to be. Because I'm telling you right now, the Bills aren't even sniffing the postseason without Josh Allen as their quarterback.
It's tough because and many people go to this immediately when discussing MVP. Is it the best player on the best team? That's kind of how like the Heisman Trophy has kind of gone. Not as much this year because a not very good team had their quarterback win the Heisman Trophy, but oftentimes it's the best player on the best team. And the way that the odds are stacking up, it appears that's the way the betting community seems to feel that this is going to go. The Ravens are the best team in football because they just beat the Niners easily, so then Lamar Jackson's the MVP. Are his numbers, comparatively speaking to even other quarterbacks in the conversation, the same or close or better? Not really. He's way behind in passing compared to Brock Purdy, Josh Allen, Tua Tagovailoa. I said it for you, so you don't have to. He's obviously making up for that in running the football, but then you go to Josh Allen. He obviously runs the ball well, effectively, and his numbers overall down from the past few years in terms of running. We understand that was a major talking point earlier in the season. He's done a little bit more of it during this crunch period of time. You look at overall touchdowns, Allen is right there. I mean, he's been doing that. If you want to make a case that Josh Allen should be the league MVP because of where the Bills were and what he has done in totality and his importance of this football team, right, I get there. But if you take Lamar Jackson off the Baltimore Ravens, they're not the Baltimore Ravens that they are. I think, and maybe this is unfair, Brock Purdy has done some really good things. I'm not as sold of if Brock Purdy wasn't the quarterback, the 49ers still wouldn't be a very good football team because we've seen Jimmy Garoppolo take them. Sam Darnold even looked good late in that game. I'm not saying they would be as good and that Brock Purdy hasn't warranted the accolades and praise that he's gotten. But I think Christian McCaffrey is maybe more of an important piece to that offense and that team. And if you want to go to Tua, I honestly think Tyreek Hill's been more important to them than Tua Tagovailoa.
So you and I think me personally, I think this comes down to Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen over the last couple of weeks. When it comes to the 49ers, you kind of touched on it right there. I don't see a big of a drop for the 49ers if Brock Purdy isn't there. We've seen that with the 49ers before with other quarterbacks in the system there. I also don't see Christian McCaffrey able to do it either, just because of his position. If you want to call it the most fun player to watch in the NFL right now, or the player you would want to build your team around, yeah, Christian McCaffrey, but most valuable player, if he's banged up for a while, the 49ers can probably muster through. The Bills and the Ravens cannot afford that with Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. And you're right with the Tyreek Hill thing. When it comes to who's the most important player on the Miami Dolphins, it's Tyreek Hill. You can see with your own eyes. You don't even have to look up stats. If Tyreek Hill isn't involved in it, or even now Tyreek Hill getting help from Jalen Waddle, if those guys aren't there, Tua isn't what he is with all that around him. So that makes me take Tua off the list. So if you're not going to put Tyreek Hill on there, and I can't even tell you when or if a wide receiver has ever won league MVP, I can't think
it's
of it.
Usually the running backs, and it's particularly wide receivers, they get the offensive player of the year.
Right.
Which I also think is a disservice. Now, Tyreek's been dealing with an injury, and it's funny how injuries, in some capacity from a statistical standpoint, take you back in these conversations, while at the same time, in my opinion, elevate you, because it shows, look at the Miami offense when they don't have this insanely talented and electric player. I mean, I think I've said it before, and if not, I'll just say it now. I've never seen a player on a football field accelerate from 0 to 100 the way Tyreek Hill can. The guy can catch passes, almost stop, and then shoot out of a cannon almost instantaneously. I mean, it's like he's a premium sports car out there, that there are so many fast players in the National Football League on the field at the same time as him, and he just looks like he's at a completely different level, even at this stage of his career. I put it out there on Twitter. I don't remember after what game it was. It's within the past month that, in my opinion, Tyreek Hill should be in the conversation for MVP. Here is my counter to your Josh Allen should be strongly considered. Number one, we know the mistakes that he's made. We know the Josh Allen experience. For every great roller coaster, holy crap, I can't believe he bleeping did that moment, you have the same feeling for the interceptions in the Jets game. And they lost that game because of Josh Allen. I'm not saying they lost other games because of Josh Allen, but look in the Denver game, 15-26, 177, a touchdown and 2 picks. And they lost that game, yes, because 12 men were on the field, and his wide receivers let him down in that game. I believe there was a lot of drops. But in a loss, a bad loss that puts them in the position that they've been in, like Denver and the Jets, those were in part because Josh Allen didn't elevate his game, fair or not. Then they're on this 3-game winning streak. 233, a touchdown and an interception at 54% against Kansas City. We understand the moments that he had, but I'd go maybe towards the defense and say the defense won them that game. Dallas, we understand what James Cook and the running game was doing. They didn't need Josh Allen. But he's 7 for 15 for 94 yards and a touchdown. In what could have been a statement-type performance and a statement platform, he had the most pedestrian numbers of his season. The Chargers, they were grinding it out. They should have smoked that team.
Correct.
They barely eke it out, 15-21, 237, a touchdown and an interception, a bad interception. So to me, it's, all right, we're at the home stretch. The Bills are gaining momentum. They're back into the conversation as a contender. And it honestly, it's not in spite of Josh Allen, but is Josh Allen the reason they're winning these games?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think at the end of the day, it is.
In part it is, but it's not only because.
So, but my point will be this. If you don't have Josh Allen to make not just the touchdown throw to Gabe Davis, but to the one down the sideline that he gets, if you don't have him as your quarterback, that we could maybe knock that play off the books right there. I think in the Cowboys game, It was, this is our game plan. Even if it's working, we don't care, Josh. You're doing it. But the fact that you're out there on the field and the Cowboys have to recognize it is playing part of the role on why James Cook was able to do what they do, because he had to be accounted for. And, I mean, the Chiefs game, I can go back to, that was just keep winning mode, because we had, you and I think the rest of the NFL world and Bills Mafia, all were in agreement. Just do what you can do to beat the Chiefs and Cowboys and move on and hopefully steamroll the Patriots, steamroll the Chargers, which didn't happen, which is cause for concern with me right now with the passing game, because the Patriots coming up are really good at stopping the run. You're going to need to be better at passing the ball on Sunday. We'll get to that later, John. But I just think the good really outweighs the bad with Josh Allen right now. And if the Bills are able to do what they do and Josh Allen gets his head on straight, they have a decent game against the Patriots and then go down to Miami and take the AFC East, and he plays a major role in it, then that to me right there says, well, that's why he's the MVP, because that wouldn't have happened without.
Now, don't get it twisted. By no means am I.
Oh, no, I always get everything twisted.
By no means am I trying to say Josh Allen's had a pedestrian season. He's not an elite quarterback. I agree with you in terms of the awesome plays and how he's maybe one of two players on the planet that could do the things that he does in moments in all of these games. I'm not disputing that. I just look at it and say he's kind of trying to chase the pack that's in front of him.
Okay.
And when you do that, you need to be above everybody else. And recently, in the strongest part of the schedule where the Bills are playing their best games, he hasn't necessarily done that. Now, Philadelphia's a game they lost. He was insanely good. Like, I mean, those and I don't need him or expect him to have those performances every single week. And like you said, in the Dallas game, he wasn't called upon to even need to be at that level. But that's the type of stuff that I think he needs to elevate himself into that conversation more strongly.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you. He has a strong performance against New England, a team that they should beat. And then if he does what he does typically to the Dolphins, all right. I mean, maybe we're talking about a last-second surge where now you say you have the second-best team in the AFC. They're arguably the hottest team in football, maybe next to the Ravens. And then that's where I could get to the Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen part of it. But as of right now, I understand why Josh is maybe behind some of these other guys.
Yeah, no, and I get it too. I just, like Lamar Jackson's previous MVP run, he stood out to me. I don't know if it's just because how the season is.
Well, maybe
out.
nobody's standing out, and that's why it's tougher to say one guy over another.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. And if, I don't know, you might have the math better in your head, but if the Ravens do beat the Dolphins, do they have much to play for at the end of the season?
No, I believe they would be the 1 seed.
Yeah, so they would lock it up. So, again, I don't know if Lamar Jackson's sitting and Josh Allen has this huge game to wrap up the season, if that might be burnt into people's brains. That's how the 2023 season ended, with Josh Allen being fantastic.
And again, I just feel from a voter outside perspective, because we know a lot of these national people, the people maybe who are voting, they don't watch every game.
Right.
They see the highlights, and they'll look at his numbers and say, oh, an interception in 10 out of 11 games. Oh, he leads the league in interceptions. Oh, he has this many turnovers running the ball. Oh, look what he did against Dallas. Oh, they beat the snot out of him, but he didn't do a whole lot. They ran the ball really well. I think we're so close to it. We also know who Josh is. Like, we know the importance. We see every play that he does. There's no way that the grand scheme, people who decide these awards, have watched every single play. They only see the hits and misses of the roller coaster. They don't see the in-between.
Yeah, I guess the good and bad, you and I and the rest of the local media sees it way differently than national media, John. And the Bills' defense has been there to kind of help Josh Allen get through some of these games, John, and maybe some enforcements coming in or back onto the roster now. But that's going to mean that a tough decision needs to be made at some point down the road as they get the roster where they needed to be to go for the playoffs. We have Kyer Elam off injured reserve today on the Wednesday before the Patriots game, and we still sit here waiting on Daquan Jones.
I'm not sure if it happens this week. I saw him after practice. It was a walkthrough on Wednesday. I saw him after practice getting in extra work along with A.J. Epinesa, who's injured but not on injured reserve.
Both my golf partners over the summer.
And
I'm
so,
just saying.
So you're the reason they got hurt. Good work.
Yep.
So they were getting in extra work. With Jones, I think it's just, getting the feel back and things like that. Some people may say, oh, it's just New England. Just save them for another week. I don't think the Bills will make a decision based on that.
Right.
What I do think the Bills would do is say, let's just wait another week, let him get his legs so it's not as much of a juggling act of necessarily snap counts or things like that. But the counter to that is, let's get him out there against New England, knock some rust off, and then his second game, he can maybe be more closer to himself when all the chips are on the table against the Miami Dolphins. Of course, the counter to that is if the Dolphins beat the Ravens, the division's out of hand and it doesn't matter nearly as much. So I see all sides of it. The big question, though, with the whenever Daquan Jones is activated off injured reserve, the Bills got to make a corresponding roster move.
Right.
And who on the entire 53 is the odd man out? You have some listed here on our fancy rundown. I already told you earlier today I disagree with half of the names on here, maybe more.
So here's the list I put down. People at that position who I think they could be like, okay, we could do without them moving forward. I'm really stuck on Deontay Hardy, which if you look at the Bills wide receiver, and it's not just because of his fumble returning the punt against the Chargers, I just think he's been such a letdown the entire season on what the expectations were from him, from what you got to even early in the season trying to force him to be part of the game plan, and I think that cost the Bills at time. I think you can have Shakir or Ty Johnson or someone else back there returning punts because he's not returning kicks. You still have Andy Isabella down on the practice squad as well. Poona Ford, Linval Joseph, Kingsley Jonathan, I put down there because if you got to make a decision and you're looking at the defensive tackle position, those were just the names that maybe one of them would go, but personally, I lean heavy towards Deontay Hardy.
Well, just for clarification, Kingsley Jonathan's more of an edge, not
I know.
an interior guy.
When I said that, I looked over at the depth chart, and I was like, oh, swing and a miss on that.
To me, no way Linval Joseph. No way. They picked him up. He's been great in the role that he has. That dude, we talked about it when he was originally signed. He truly is massive. And I notice him at least once a game being a disruptive, big force on the interior. Poona Ford's been inactive the majority of the season. Ironically enough, he made a big play at a sack in that Chargers game. And until Daquan Jones comes back, I assume he'll still be active here. Here is the thing for me. Does it have to be defensive tackle in, defensive lineman in, defensive tackle, defensive lineman out? I actually don't think so. I feel that unit also has been so strong and they rotate so much that it wouldn't be a bad thing to just have an extra number on there.
That's why I arrived at Deontay Hardy.
And I'm fine with Deontay Hardy. You mentioned Andy Isabella. In the postseason, it is unlimited call-ups for people on the practice squad. So let's say the Bills don't activate Daquan Jones this week. Then it's week 17. If you cut Deontay Hardy, you could elevate Andy Isabella, and then once you reach the playoffs, you could just elevate him. So it's almost like a free wide receiver to fill his role as a returner or things like that. That is one way that you could do it. I still feel like maybe just from a number standpoint that they wouldn't necessarily do that. I actually heard our friend Sal Capaccio mention this name this morning, and it piqued my interest. Jermaine Ifedi.
Oh, okay.
He's an offensive lineman that literally has been inactive, I believe, all season.
I guess why that didn't even pop into my head.
Correct. And so Ryan Vandemark, Alec Anderson, they're inactive often, or Vandemark isn't, and Fetty. I mean, could you just release Ifedi and roll with 9 offensive linemen? And maybe Ifedi goes on the practice squad. Maybe you can call someone else up from the practice squad. Do you need 10 offensive linemen?
I got to be honest with you. My brain did not even go to offensive linemen. But now that you're bringing it to my attention, maybe you don't. And I would assume Ifedi could get to the practice squad.
Right. And so that is, or some other offensive lineman. Again, you also have the depth there. That's one. Other names that I know people maybe have on their radar. Ty Johnson, who's been hurt, but I feel that has done well.
I think he's done too well to do that.
Latavius Murray, I don't think he's been too involved. I think he's too much of a leader and a veteran. I don't think that it'd be the best look or feel to say, hey, you're the guy who called the players-only meeting. You've been a veteran. There's someone that they've relied upon, especially in pass protection all season long. We know you've been searching, came here to be part of a postseason run. We're going to cut you right before the playoffs begin. I don't see it. I know people liked and were encouraged from what they saw from Leonard Fournette. So that's part of this. Again, the practice squad gymnastics. Once you hit the postseason, you could maybe go down a running back and just yo-yo Fournette up and down. And then finally is DeMar Hamlin. Now, I think with Micah Hyde's injuries this season and even Jordan Poyer at times, I don't think you want to go down a safety. I recognize when fully healthy, he's been inactive all year. And even when active, he'll play special teams, but Cam Lewis has been the guy that has been inserted into the 3 safety looks when they've been down a guy. I've said it all along. Things would really have to get stacked against them, especially approaching the 1-year anniversary of what happened in Cincinnati. He's their Ed Block Courage Award nominee and we know, I think the betting odds have him as the leader in the clubhouse for comeback player of the year.
I saw that, which I found kind of odd, but I get it.
So I that's where I would go, but I think I would probably land on the 2 most likely. I'm fine with Deontay Hardy, even though he is signed through next year. So there would be some roster dead cap minimal.
Right.
But, and then Jermaine Ifedi, because to your point, until I heard it mentioned earlier today by Sal, I just completely forgot about it myself.
Yeah. So.
And also, just one quick thing. We just threw out all these names. Justin Shorter is also an injured reserve, and his date is approaching. He was also opened his 21-day window the same day as Daquan Jones. So if we're talking about a wide receiver, there's a decision they're going to have to make with Shorter in the next week or so.
I don't see Shorter happening.
I don't either. But just for logistics standpoint, understand there is going to be another roster decision that's going to need to be made along with Jones.
Yeah, no, I get it. I think even on Sal's show this morning, I heard a caller mention mentioning getting Shorter more into the mix at this point in the season, which seems super foolish to me. Playoffs, John. I mean, that's the big focus at this point. The Bills can clinch a playoff spot over the weekend with a win over the Patriots and getting some help. And you tweeted out what I'm assuming the NFL sent out, which are all the scenarios, which when you look at it at first glance, it's very daunting trying to figure it out.
That's why I did the emoji with the spiral eyeballs. Like you're like, whoa, what's happening?
And even when you sit there and read it. So we'll put it up on the screen for those watching on YouTube and on Facebook so you can see it at home. And John, try and go through these scenarios which would clinch a berth for the Bills, possibly with the AFC East still on the line, depending on what goes on with the Ravens and the Dolphins.
So this is just for a playoff berth.
Yeah.
We're not I'll just say the division is this. If the Dolphins beat the Ravens, the AFC East is gone. Miami wins it. If Miami loses to the Ravens and the Bills win this weekend, next week down in Miami is for the AFC East title. That's not on the graphic.
5 scenario.
So five simple. I'll say simple, but there's 5 scenarios here for the Bills simply to clinch a playoff berth. The Steelers lose or tie, and the Bengals lose or tie. The Bengals are at the Chiefs. The Steelers are at the Seahawks. In my opinion, Pittsburgh losing, Cincinnati losing, the most likely scenario for the Bills to get into the postseason this week. Scenario number 2 for the Bills to clinch a playoff berth this weekend. This is all with the Bills winning. Steelers lose or tie, and the Jaguars lose or tie. Jacksonville is hosting the Carolina Panthers. As flawed, and even if C.J. Beathard has to play, I don't see Carolina beating Jacksonville this week. Scenario number 3, Steelers lose or tie, Texans lose or tie, and the Colts lose or tie. Texans host the Titans. They could lose.
They could.
Colts hosting the Raiders. I think they could lose that as well. So that's another scenario where I think, all right, Steelers could lose to Seattle. Texans could lose to Tennessee. Colts could lose to Vegas. I think it's plausible. Obviously, it's 3 teams.
Right.
But I think it's possible.
The first matchup is still in the lead on here.
Scenario number 4.
Yeah.
Bengals lose or tie, and the Jags lose or tie. Again, Cincinnati is at the Chiefs. I think as bad as the Chiefs have looked of late, I think we're comfortable thinking Kansas City gets it done.
Yeah.
And as I said, Jags fall into the Panthers, unlikely. And then scenario 5, Bengals lose or tie, Texans lose or tie, and Indianapolis lose or tie. I think that's possible.
I would go scenario 1, scenario 5.
Right.
Is the order, and then the rest is just basically a giant mishmash to me.
Right. So it's 5 teams that you want to lose. It's Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Jacksonville, Houston, Indianapolis. And even if these scenarios don't play out, if some of them lose, which as I laid out who they're playing, you assume it brings you closer to reality. As long as the Bills win, some of these teams lose, you're getting closer to even a scenario where if the Bills lost to Miami Week 18, they still would probably get in if the chips fall a certain way this week. And some of these teams play each other Week 18. So I think that's what plays into it as well. Houston, I believe, plays Indianapolis Week 18. So one of those teams would be out of the mix as well. So 5 playoff scenarios for the Bills to earn a berth this week, as long as they also beat the New England Patriots. And then, as I said, you have the whole division dynamic of this, which is far simpler. Baltimore beats Miami, and the Bills beat New England. Final game of the regular season, which I would put my money on, and I'm still strong on it either way. I think it'll be Sunday Night Football, Week 18.
I'm with you on that.
Bills at Dolphins for the AFC East, should Miami lose this upcoming weekend to Baltimore. And that game is at the exact same time as the Bills game. These other games, a lot of them are in the 4 o'clock window. So it's, all right, you'll know where the Bills stand following the New England game in terms of their chances to win the East. And then you'll just have to wait through the afternoon window to find out if they're in the playoffs regardless.
Yeah, when you were talking about the Sunday night game, if all this plays out, me and some other guys, we were looking at what some of the other bigger games might be. But if you have the Bills, Dolphins, AFC East, 2 of the marquee teams the entire season going head-to-head, that's your Sunday night football game to end everything.
Right. So this will be tough for our podcast we may have to push it. I know at 1 o'clock game, we don't really want to push the post-game pod that much, but the Steelers game and the Bengals game are in the 4 o'clock window. The Dolphins-Ravens, like I said, is at 1 o'clock. So is the Titans-Texans game, the Raiders game, the Jacksonville game. Those are all in the 1 o'clock window as well. So you'll have a pretty good feel.
Yeah.
It's just those other two, which are ironically what we said is the most likely, is Cincinnati losing and Pittsburgh losing. Those are 4 and 425 games.
Bill's going to take care of their own business first, John, and that means beating a team that they should have beat on the road in Foxborough earlier in the season, but now they host the New England Patriots, John. And I guess the big storyline with everything going on with the Patriots this season and how bad they are and what's Bill Belichick's future with the Patriots, and does Bob Kraft already have something in place where they've already planned to move on? This could be after 20-plus years of dealing with the Patriots. And at one point, Tom Brady had more wins at Highmark Stadium or whatever it was referred to back then than any Bills quarterback in recent history, just from playing there once a season. But when you're talking about Bill Belichick, this could be it for him walking the sidelines with his New England Patriots gear on, guiding the Patriots. Whether Bill Belichick goes somewhere else remains to be seen, but it looks like as far as this game goes, it's the last visit from Bill Belichick.
Wild. And like, how do you feel about it? It is weird because you're right. For so long, the mystique, the aura, the evil empire that was New England had such a grasp over not just the Buffalo Bills, but seemingly everyone in the AFC and the NFL. And then since Tom Brady left, it is certainly felt, and the results have been different. They are human. It's almost like Samson's hair got cut off, except it was Tom Brady went away, and they're vulnerable. And they've almost been a punching bag. They've gotten some shots in themselves, surprisingly, with the Bills of the past 3 years since Brady left. But it's like, all right, what do you think of Belichick? Is he someone that you want to keep around? Because, one, you just like kicking him when he's down, and two, you don't believe that he is the right guy to turn the ship around in New England, and you feel like the longer he stays, the longer that this lull that they have found themselves in continues. It's a weird dynamic and conversation to have about a guy that was, and I still think should be and is by many, considered to be the greatest head coach of all time.
I look at it this way. From a Bills point of view, what do you get out of beating someone past their prime? Yeah, there's all that history there, but if you flip it around, like, just step out of your own bubble and flip it around and think about teams that finally beat Marv Levy. Like, were they really, did it reach I even look at Don Shula with the Dolphins. There was a point where the Dolphins weren't the Dolphins anymore with Don Shula, and you started to feel bad for him. Tom Landry with the Cowboys.
No one is feeling bad for Bill Belichick, especially here in Western New York.
I get that about feeling bad, but I just get, what do you get out of it? I've said it to other people, like, what are you getting out of the Patriots being bad? They're a bad team. They were good for a while. Like, I don't know. Well, I am that kind of person because I root against my friends' teams all the time. But, I mean, I get it, but I don't get it at the same time. If you're on the Patriots side, you got to just have this sick feeling in your stomach because the bulk of people I know in New England are like, I hate to say it, but this whole thing just needs to change at this point. We can't keep going down this road.
Isn't that fascinating? And I know I like to poke the bear and say and let people know you're from New England, born and raised, and obviously have a lot of roots and ties there.
Played college football in New England.
I mean, you were on a college football team. But you have it's funny and interesting to get your perspective of the people all back home that are Patriots fans and their thoughts on it. It's just wild to think that the masses can turn so quick regardless of what that man has has helped bring them.
Yeah.
And do many of them feel that it actually, after years removed from Brady, that it actually was Brady and not Belichick?
Yes, 100%. 99%, I'd say that. I mean, if you look at everything that happened, and I mean, if you go back to last year when Matt Patricia was the offensive coordinator after being a defensive coordinator that's when the fan base started being like, has things just gotten so bad that they're grasping at straws right now over at Gillette Stadium? And I think this year was just the breaking point, bouncing back and forth between quarterbacks, that lull. And now all of a sudden, I mean, it even goes this far, John. You had a team that was in position to maybe get a really good draft pick, now rips off wins against the Steelers and the Broncos that helped the Bills, by the way. But as a Patriots fan, you're like, what? Why are they doing this?
Because they need the quarterback.
How do you take on the Chargers, score 0, and the Chargers beat you 6-0?
Well, the weather was horrible.
Okay, but that was always the Patriots thing. A team from California or a dome team comes out in horrible weather, we own them.
Because they don't have the quarterback, which is what you're saying. You're saying these wins of rallying to beat Denver and all of this and beating Pittsburgh, rallying to, coming out the gates and this is bad for the long-term solutions because it just slides you down from getting it. Here's my one thing of the Belichick-Brady thing. Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time.
Agreed.
But I don't think they win at least half of those Super Bowls, at least, without Belichick. I mean, that Rams offense was through the roof.
Wait.
260 yards of total offense for L.A.
The first Rams Super Bowl, right?
I'm talking about the last one.
Okay.
With Jared Goff, Todd Gurley.
So that was my point. You look at both those. It was the greatest show on turf in 2001.
Yes.
They shut him down. Some may say they filmed practice. Others may deny it. And then the Rams again in their final Super Bowl victory. What was that score? 14-10?
13-3. That game stunk.
Yeah, it did.
Stunk. It was horrible. Now, yeah, they lost to Philadelphia, and they had 538 total yards, and New England had over 600.
With no Julian Edelman in that one, too.
The Atlanta one was Brady and them just being awesome as much as it was. Obviously, many believe they should have lost to Seattle with the decision to throw it instead of run it with Marshawn Lynch. The 2 losses to the Giants, but that Philadelphia team with Donovan McNabb and Terrell Owens, that was a great team.
Yeah.
21 points. They held them in check. These games were all close, and that's what elevated Brady because he's the reason, the end. Like, he was the guy who'd always seem to get the drive at the most critical moment. But to me, it would be unfair to look at the end. Oh, well, once Brady left, they couldn't do anything, and the teams were bad. Right, but the defenses were still good. And we all understand NFL teams and just football teams, by and large, are completely driven by the quarterback. We don't have to say that here. 17 years, they didn't have one. They had Jim Kelly. They didn't really have a quarterback after Jim Kelly. They didn't make the playoffs. Now they have Josh Allen, and we're talking about an argument about him being the MVP of the league. This is what happens. And so I don't even, if you're Belichick, do you want to start over? That's the thing. That's the next part of this conversation for me. And it would be, do you want to start over in New England where you get this young quarterback, but the roster still needs so much done to it? Or do you I've seen him or Jim Harbaugh, front runners for the Chargers job. Do you want to do that? At his age, I don't know, is he stubborn and one of these guys that just can't give it up?
I think he's stubborn, A. B, I think the Chargers are set up for Bill Belichick to come in and be successful right away. I think that's appealing. I've heard the Commanders linked to Belichick and the Carolina Panthers linked to him. But if those are the three on the table, I'd say Chargers all the way.
Well, then, of course, there's this thought of, well, does he just bring all of his staff? And what does that do? Like, do you want Josh McDaniels as the offensive coordinator? Do you want Matt Patricia or whomever working the defense? Or what? Like, do you want these guys back? Because have they also been contributing to the problem in New England?
It never really works getting that band back together again. I think that happened with like Charlie Weiss and Romeo Crennel. I don't think they ever came back, but they left and they weren't successful. I think Josh was the only one to come back after failing in Denver. And then what did he agree to the maybe that was after he went back to the Patriots.
Right.
And I think Josh McDaniels left such a stain on the NFL right now. I don't know, even if you were loyal to him, if you would want him around your players. I mean, I wouldn't do that.
Here's the interesting thing. We're having this conversation, and it's almost, and we went through the playoff scenarios and all this, and it's just like this foregone conclusion. The Bills, all right, they're going to beat Belichick. They're going to set this up for Week 18, all these scenarios. They played, arguably, the Bills played one of their worst games of the season against New England, and New England played one of their best. The funny thing is, Mac Jones was great in that game, and he's not even their quarterback anymore. So, but that was a thing I asked some of the players. I asked Sean McDermott of, all right, you take every game seriously, every opponent seriously, but are things heightened a little bit, understanding that, all right, these guys beat you earlier? And they said, yeah, a little bit. We feel like we're a different team right now, but that defense is good. It's still Bill Belichick. And Bailey Zappi hasn't been great. He hasn't been horrible, though. We've seen him make some throws. This by no means should be considered a foregone conclusion to people.
Right. And it's not like you dominated Easton Stick out in L.A. as well. So you've already lost to Mac Jones. Now you have Bailey Zappi, who seems to have turned things around there for better or worse, however you want to put it, John. But the game, I have been told there might be snow during the game, just so you're aware of it.
I'm back in the press box this week, baby.
I know.
Bring on whatever.
I have from BetMGM Bills -12 going into this, which...
Was that like a I'm Ron Burgundy?
I don't know. I always look for the half point, and when it's not there, I question my skills of putting pen to paper. But I believe it was just 12, or not just 12. I can't get past every other game and just not seeing the Dallas game as like a perfect thing. I just don't see the Bills beating teams right now by more than, I'll say, 7.5 points.
So you would do an adjusted spread. A little okay.
I don't know how to gamble that much.
Well, that's fine. If I was in a parlay, I'd probably do an adjusted. I'll take the Bills 12. I think the over-under you have here at 40.5, I'm going to go under, and it's honestly largely because I don't believe in the New England offense, and I'm gaining even more confidence in the Bills' defense. So I look at it as like a 27-6 game, and because the opponent's not going to get there, I don't think that the over-under will hit, or the over will hit.
Yeah, I'm on the under too. Excuse me. I don't know. I'm looking at more like something like 20-14. The Bills end up, or 21-14. Is that right? Yeah, I said 7.5. 21-14.
So you wouldn't take 7.5. They would lose. It's 21-14.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
So you'd have to do something like 21-10, 24-14.
21-13.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, I mean, I think that's realistic. If there's the elements I'm not particularly concerned about in terms of the Bills scoring, they haven't always been great in the red zone. To me, offensively, and I know we kind of just skirted through it, Stephon Diggs, I think, needs to be a focal point here. I know it's late. James Cook's been playing well, but this run Stephon Diggs has been on, no 100-yard games since the middle of October, and he was on and off the field. more than we've seen, like slower snap counts in the Chargers game. Sean McDermott says it's not injury related. And he hit this lull at this part of the late part of the season a year ago. Josh Allen indicating, well, he's getting double teamed a lot, but Stephon Diggs has beat double teams his entire career. So the passing game as a whole for the Bills has not been at full cylinders here. And
it's concerning to me.
That's fair. I think it's fair to say it's concerning. And just because we're at the point in the season, especially with where the Bills were in the standings, to just say, oh, okay, just win. It doesn't matter how you do it. I think, again, as I said on the postgame podcast, I think we're broadening our view of the season to say, all right, yes, ultimately they just have to win, but we also are looking at this team with a lens towards the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
And if Stephon Diggs is stuck in this 5 catches for 40 or less yards, 4 catches for 40 or less yards on 6 to 8 targets, that's a problem. I think he's the guy that I think it's him number one, and I'm fine with James Cook being the secondary offensive threat. I think that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like, is it concerning that Dalton Kincaid's evaporated from the offense? Not as much as Stephon Diggs. Like, Dalton Kincaid wasn't winning your games earlier. Stephon Diggs was the best receiver in football the first month and a half. So to me, in this game, much like I think I said going into the LA game, I want to see it doesn't have to be 150, but I need to see signs that Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen are aligned. Not that there's dissension. I'm not putting that there. I'm just saying production has to match.
You really need that at this point. Like, you need to see something more.
It's the one thing on this team through this winning streak that still sticks out to me as that's problematic. The defense has been good. The running game has gotten going. They're closing out tight games against good and bad teams. They blew out a really good team. The only thing here that I'm saying, okay, Gabe Davis. I didn't need to see Gabe Davis pop off, but that's nice to see. I don't need to see Dalton Kincaid get back to 80 yards on 7 catches and be a focal point in the middle of the field. I don't need to see that to feel good. I need to see Stephon Diggs pop in one of these last 2 games to go into the postseason and say, all right, the Bills kind of have every element in the right place.
And just one final thing there, when you say, the mentality at one point, maybe right around the bye week, was just win these games and get into the playoffs. I think that was all well and good until you barely beat the Chargers. And your point of view changed because it was like, well, wait a minute. The Bills were supposed to destroy the Chargers and had a tough time and had to pull off a 2-point win. That was really dicey at the end. That moment right there just changed. I don't want to speak for anyone else, but my view of things, like, maybe it's not just win and get into the playoffs. Because if you're entering the playoffs just squeaking by the Chargers and the Patriots and maybe having one really decent game against the Dolphins, are you that confident at them in the postseason that they're going to be able to dominate in the wild card round and get to the next round and beyond? I'm not. I wouldn't be.
Like I said, I'll say this to wrap up until we get to the 3 and out is it was encouraging to me the Bills could beat the Chargers playing the way they did because they lost that game to the Jets. They lost that game to Jacksonville. They lost that game to Denver. They lost that game to New England. Like, they lost that game where, hey, we're kind of grinding it out. The first quarter stunk. They look good in the second. It doesn't really come back and carry over much into the second half, but the defense made stops when they needed to make stops. The offense had the drive when they needed to make the drive. They overcame 3 turnovers. All of the things that were all at the center of these bad losses earlier in the season were in that LA game, and they still found a way to win. To me, that's encouraging, especially then when you look at the rest of even just this past week in the NFL. Kansas City wasn't able to overcome it. Denver wasn't able to overcome it. There's other teams here. San Francisco wasn't able to overcome it. Mm-hmm. You saw other good contending teams, not Denver, but you get what I'm saying. Like, you saw other teams have some bad losses and not be able to just simply get the W.
Fair enough. Let's do a little 3 and out, John. And I kind of wrote this backwards on here because I didn't hear about the Russell Wilson stuff until after other things. But quarterback shakeups going on around the NFL. You have Russell Wilson benched for Jarrett Stidham. If you want to get into that, I mean, he's the big name on the list right here who's now benched. And you see reports that, there's money involved in this as well.
Yeah, that's it. It's purely money. They're now the 12 seats. They're behind Vegas in the tiebreaker. Then a game behind Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Houston, Indianapolis, who are all at 8 and 7. There's probably tiebreaker scenarios with those as well. Outside looking in, and is the juice worth the squeeze? Hey, let's claw our way in as a 7 seed, pay Russell Wilson this incredible amount of money, or just roll with it here. I mean, and let's be honest, Russell Wilson's not the future. I mean, I think he has 2 more years, 2 more years on his deal. Jarrett Stidham certainly isn't either, but maybe, kind of paving the way for the next one to get drafted at this upcoming offseason. And then Brissett, whatever. I mean,
I was going to say, I don't even know why I put Brissett in there.
Well, it's fine. It's just Sam Howell had good moments.
Right.
I had him on my fantasy team. He's actually a decent fantasy quarterback, but they're not out of it in terms of the postseason and things like that. So, I mean, I guess – oh, no, Washington is eliminated. They're 4-11. Wow, I was way off. So maybe – way off, idiot. But just Brissett, I think Ron Rivera's probably getting fired anyways, but, try to do some things at the end. And then Tyrod Taylor, listen.
Yeah.
Tommy Cutlets was a fun story, but he's not good. He wasn't good even in the games that they were winning.
They tried so hard to make it. He even won. Didn't he win Offensive Player of the Week for the AFC?
Him and Zach Wilson.
Or the NFC. Yeah.
The same week. What a joke. But whatever. We know what Tyrod is. He's a fine quarterback, and he's certainly better than Danny DeVito, Tommy Cutlets, whatever you want to. So that's Dave's just trying to do the best for his team to let them try to win some games down the stretch.
Done with football, John. Warm Christmas versus white Christmas. A year ago, we were dealing with that blizzard in Buffalo, and then this year, close to 60 degrees on Christmas Day, and you could sit out on your patio and enjoy a cocktail and some snacks. Even grill if you wanted to, John, on Christmas, without having to warm up and put a jacket on. And then finally, of course, I went golfing the day after Christmas, where for some reason around the golf course where I was, it rained out everywhere else. But at the 18 holes there, for the time I was golfing, no rain whatsoever the entire time.
Was it crowded?
I ended up paired with someone. I wouldn't say it was mob, but it wasn't like other times I've gone when it's been cooler out where there's been no one there. But I think,
I'm all for warmth.
Yeah.
It didn't feel as much like Christmas because it was warm. There was no snow, even on the ground still. But I saw a lot of people. I don't own a smoker, but I know people that do. They used it on Christmas. That would have been super cool. Give me warmth, man. Listen, I have this argument with people around here all the time. Oh, I like the cold. No, you don't.
No one likes the cold.
Nobody likes the cold. Don't be tough. Don't be, I'm from Buffalo. No, stop it. Stop it. Right. I'm all for it. And then Steve Tasker actually told me this as I was walking out the facility today. Name dropper.
I was going to say, okay, big shot.
That we're in the midst of a stretch here in Buffalo of over 300 days in a row where the temperature has not dropped into the teens. And obviously it's not really supposed to, at least in the extended 7+ day forecast. So we're going to hit darn near almost 11 months straight without it dropping into the teens. And let me tell you, keep it coming.
Well, I hope we're not in for a horrible February. I'll say that. And shout out to the golf course, John, I went to.
Why don't you just say it?
Glen Oak.
There you go.
In Amherst. The guy who was there yesterday was great. He basically, whatever you want to do, just go out there, $33. The only thing you had to do was walk. No cart, which I was fine with after eating like crap for 3 days in a row. But from what I was told by my buddy Tony, who I was paired with, he got so many requests on Christmas Day to see if they were open that he just went over to the golf course, put up a sign that said, "Merry Christmas, have at it." And you could just walk on the golf course and go golfing.
They are one of the few courses, as you know, obviously, because we've golfed year-round, essentially, whenever possible, that's open year-round. Like, I mean, they just leave the pins in. There's not really, they don't change the pin locations. There's probably no rakes in the bunkers or anything like that.
Not.
Yeah, it's just, get out there and
that's why my score's better, because you just pull the ball out of the wet,
you go.
crappy sand trap.
Big fan of that course.
Yeah, so shout out to them. Okay, we have New Year's Eve coming up, John. The Bills play New Year's Eve afternoon. Our podcast and our show following that, I think that gets us done with work at around 9:30, a little bit before 10. So done in time for the big New Year's Eve thing. I'm in my 50s now, John. I don't care about parties. I don't care about getting out of control. I'm fine with getting home, having some champagne with the wife at midnight, and just relaxing the next day. I don't think I've been to a New Year's Eve party in maybe 10 years or so.
Honestly, even as my 20s went around, I always thought New Year's Eve was overrated. I was like, I go out every weekend. Why do I have to now get price gouged, pay $100+ to go to a bar like I would do any other Friday or Saturday, and then get dressed up just because it's New Year's Eve?
Yeah.
Like, to me, it was just an excuse for people who never go out to really dive into it. I don't care about New Year's. Last year, my wife actually kind of got mad at me, and there was like a cool video of the Ohio State-Georgia game, how it literally the game-winning field goal by Georgia went through the uprights at the crack of midnight.
I remember
And
that.
so we didn't actually, at my house, because I'm an Ohio State fan, see the ball drop. Heather's like, we got to turn it over. And I'm like, no. But Ohio State not in the college football playoff. I don't even think there's really any games. The Sunday night game should be over by then. So, I don't care. I'm fine sitting in my house and just doing whatever. I mean, I sound lame, but I'm good doing that most nights anyways.
Well, I do that most nights.
I got my kegerator and my couch. What more do I need?
That's right. Stay nice and warm. Stay safe. Stay in. I mean, pretty much, me, after working all week, especially on Bills game days.
Well, you're not really working this week, let's be fair.
This week? Probably since September. All right, we got to go. Wow, this was another one of those podcasts where I was like, let's do it quick, 30 minutes and out. It's now an hour.
Good conversations, Kevin.
I know, absolutely. So we'll be back with you with the Buffalo End Zone postgame show following Bills Patriots on Sunday. That's a 1 o'clock kickoff. And then another podcast to follow. And then we'll see what it's like, John. See what we're going to get ready for a week from today when you start getting ready for Bills Dolphins, and we'll see what happens. As always.